You ever wonder how websites went from being these simple, kind of static pages to the complex, interactive apps we use every single day? Well, a huge piece of that puzzle is thanks to a framework that just completely changed the game. So let's dive into the story of AngularJS, the framework that really did start a revolution.
Okay, so before 2010, this was the big problem. If you wanted a web page to do anything, like react when a user clicks a button or update a shopping cart, you had to write so much complicated code. You had to manually find and change every little piece of the page. It was slow, super easy to mess up, and honestly, it was just a total nightmare to manage.
And the difference was, it was night and day. We went from this world of doing everything by hand, all these complex, repetitive tasks, to something that felt like actual magic. It was suddenly automatic, declarative, and modular. This shift was the revolution, and AngularJS was right there, leading the charge.
To really get the picture, let's just set the scene for a second. Imagine you're a developer back then. Your go-to tool is probably a library called jQuery. It was great, but for every single change in your app's data, you had to write specific instructions to hunt down the right element on the page and then update it yourself, every single time.
But then, this side project by a Google engineer named Misho Hevry started bubbling up. He was trying to solve this exact problem. He just wanted to make building web apps way simpler. So in 2010, Google released it to the world as an open-source framework, and believe me, the web development community took notice in a big way.
The whole idea behind AngularJS was, well, it was a totally new way of thinking. Instead of using JavaScript to boss around a static HTML page, the question was, what if we could teach HTML to be dynamic all by itself? What if we could just enhance it to build full-blown applications?
And that right there became its official motto. It just perfectly captures the mission. See, AngularJS wasn't trying to replace HTML, it was trying to give it superpowers, making it powerful enough to handle the crazy demands of modern web apps.
So how to do all this? Through a few really powerful ideas. It let you just declare what you wanted the UI to look like right in your HTML. No more step-by-step instructions. It introduced this incredible concept of two-way data binding. We'll get to that in a sec. And it brought these big ideas from server-side coding right into the browser, like modularity, breaking your code into reusable chunks, and dependency injection, which is really just a fancy way of saying components get the things they need automatically, instead of having to go find them.
All right, let's talk about the magic, because if there was one feature that just made developers' jaws hit the floor, it was data binding. This was the mind-blowing idea that your data and what the user sees on the screen could be automatically, perfectly in sync at all times.
And to make this happen, AngularJS gave developers a really clear structure for their code. It used a classic design pattern called Model View Controller, or MVC. And all this pattern does is neatly separate your app into three distinct, manageable parts. First up, you've got the model. This is super simple. It's just your data, the raw information. Think of a user's name, the items in a shopping cart, whatever. It's the one single source of truth for your entire application. Next, you've got the view. This is the HTML. It's what the user actually sees and clicks on. It's basically the visual representation of all that data in the model. And finally, there's the controller. This is the glue, the brains of the whole operation. The controller is the thing that takes data from the model and hands it to the view. And when a user does something in the view, the controller listens and updates the model. Okay, so here's the crucial part, the secret sauce. AngularJS had this engine running in the background called the digest cycle. It was always checking, hey, has any data in the model changed? And if it had, boom, the framework would automatically update the view to match. You, the developer, didn't have to write a single line of code to do it. That was the magic, and it saved just countless hours of boring, tedious work.
And developers got to control all this magic using these things called directives. They were just special attributes you'd add to your HTML. So something like ngModel would create that two-way data binding we talked about, while ngRepeat could take a list of data and automatically create a whole table for you. You were literally teaching HTML new tricks.
But of course, no technology gets to be king forever. The journey of AngularJS is this fascinating story of just explosive growth and then hitting the limits of its own design and ultimately paving the way for what came next. So here's kind of how it all played out. After it came out in 2010, its popularity just exploded, hitting its peak around 2014. But the web was moving at lightning speed, and by 2016, the team at Google knew a fresh start was needed. So they launched Angular 2, a complete, total rewrite from the ground up. And that really marked the beginning of the end for the original AngularJS, with official support finally stopping in 2021. So why the huge rewrite? Well, the new Angular, notice Node.js in the name, was built for the modern web. It was way faster, more powerful, and used tools like TypeScript for much safer code. But crucially, it moved away from that old MVC pattern and embraced a more modular, component-based architecture, which had become the new industry standard.
But here's the thing. Even though AngularJS is now what we'd call a legacy technology, its impact is it's impossible to overstate. It didn't just fade away into nothing. It literally laid the foundation for pretty much all modern front-end development as we know it.
And make no mistake, this wasn't some niche little tool. At its peak, AngularJS was powering huge, absolutely critical applications for some of the biggest companies on the planet. We're talking parts of Netflix, PayPal, and even Google's own massive advertising platform. And what's really incredible is that you can see AngularJS's DNA everywhere today. I mean, obviously in its successor, the modern Angular framework. But its core ideas also deeply influenced the creation of its biggest so-called rivals, like React and Vue.js.
So when you boil it all down, what did it really leave us with? Well, it comes down to a few huge contributions. It's the framework that made two-way data binding a mainstream idea. It brought serious engineering patterns like dependency injection to the browser, and maybe most importantly, it championed this idea that you should be able to just declare what your UI looks like.
Ultimately, the story of AngularJS is the story of a fundamental shift in how we build for the web. It's the moment we stopped thinking of websites as just collections of static documents and started building them as true, dynamic, responsive applications that live right inside the browser.
You know, this quote really says it all. While you're probably not writing any AngularJS code today, the concepts it pioneered, the problems it solved, the patterns it introduced, they're still with us. In fact, they've become so fundamental to how we work that we often just take them for granted.
And that kind of leaves us with one last thought. AngularJS was a revolution that was born from the limitations of its time. So it makes you wonder, what are the big limitations we're bumping up against today? And what revolutionary new ideas are just starting to emerge that are going to define the web for the next 10 years?